I was an exchange student in Japan for the years 1999 to 2000, and it was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wouldn't have my current career without it. If you have not seen part 1 of me talking about my year in Japan, you could go watch that now. You might be slightly lost without watching that part first. But then again, you might not be lost because I haven't been very linear. I've been jumping around in the story a lot. So anyway, I talked about my 4 host families and I talked about sort of my daily life of what that was like in Japan. So I think I'll touch upon now all of the trips that I went on, because I went on a lot of trips during that year. The very first trip that I went on that was overnight was through Rotary Club, and it was me and a few other exchange students in my group who went from America to Iwate, and it was this forum at Chuo High School, which is like the main prestigious central high school in Morioka. And we were there to, there were people from Russia, there were students from, I don't remember the other countries that the students were from other than Russia, but there were us from America, there were some students from Russia, and there was, oh yeah, right, there was a student from Australia, because I stayed with her at a Japanese person's house that night, so Australia, and some others. And we all, we gave speeches about the challenges in our countries and etc. And it was just one person per country giving the speech. So Sam, who was the other guy who was in Mizusawa with me, he was the only other American in Mizusawa with me. The rest of the 6 other exchange students in my group were all in Morioka. So Sam, who at the time, he wanted to become president of the United States when he grew up. But I haven't heard a blip from him since then, so who knows? But if he runs, maybe I'll vote for him. That is, if Bernie Sanders is robbed of the nomination again. Right, so Sam, since he was that kind of person, he gave the speech for us, which was great, because me and Ian, I remember, we just sat, we were on stage behind him, but we were just drawing pictures at each other and talking about robbing banks, I remember, for some random reason. We were just kind of goofing off in the back while Sam gave the really serious speech. But I remember we had, a big welcome party and nice banquet, and there was an interpreter there, and it was all official and cool and stuff. And then at the actual forum, everyone gave these very heartfelt, very political, good speeches, really solid work from high schoolers. And then the Japanese high schoolers from Chuo High School were asking these really superficial, lame, missing the mark questions during the Q&A section, what do you guys think about not wearing school uniforms? And stuff like that. It's dude, we're talking about world peace and solving world hunger and income inequality and stuff, and you're what do you feel about school uniforms? So that was kind of a why are we even here moment. Our next function, the Rotary Club took us on what they called an autumn camp, but it's my kind of camp because we stayed in a lodge. It wasn't a tent roughing it kind of camping. Yeah, we stayed in a lodge and we just hung out in a beautiful area, and Iwate is so gorgeous. I don't think I appreciated that enough when I was there because I was such a weeb and I was when am I gonna get to the next anime store? When am I gonna read my next manga? But I did notice some of the beauty in there. Unfortunately though, I didn't take that many pictures, so meh. But yeah, gorgeous scenery. We had barbecue, it was really cool. And one of the Rotarians that was one of my favorite Rotarians was Tsuyoshi-san, and he had really good English and really good accent as well. He'd spent some time in Hawaii, I think it was. But yeah, really, really cool guy, really nice and really good English speaker. And he and someone else, I forget, and I think someone else were our chaperones on that trip, and then a lot of other trips as well. So whenever Tsuyoshi-san was along, it was always great. Oh, he's amazing at karaoke too. He's a karaoke god. And I remember when I went back from the autumn camp, Sam and I, because we weren't in Morioka like the others, everyone was dropped off at Morioka, and then Sam and I had to get on the Shinkansen. Actually, it wasn't the Shinkansen, it was just the normal train back to Mizusawa. And so the Rotarian gave us each ichiman yen to get home. And it only cost sanzengeng, so we both had a lot of money left over at the end, and we're score. So I think I bought manga with mine, or maybe J-pop CDs, because by then I was super, super into J-pop and J-rock. I was watching a lot of Music Station and Hey 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 Music Champ and like other music shows, and I was getting kind of obsessed with that. So that was sort of the start of my not being super into anime anymore, because I was really into manga because I could read that all the time, and like I was bored at school, so what else am I gonna do? I'm gonna read manga. And then I also just really got into J-pop and J-rock because I hadn't even listened to American pop and rock. Whenever we went to karaoke, I would always sing J-pop and J-rock, and everyone would be like, "Why don't you sing Britney Spears?" And I'd be like, "Who's that?" So I was a dork. So that was autumn camp. And then digressing from Rotary trips, my Shugak Ryoko was between autumn camp and Rotary's winter camp. And that is like the infamous, if you've read any manga or any anime, particularly shoujo manga or shoujo anime, you've probably seen the Shugak Ryoko somewhere in there. It's second year students go on a school field trip for like 3 to 4 days. I think ours was 4 nights, 5 days. Don't recall. Had to have been, because like we bookended it with really long Shinkansen rides. But yeah, we went to Hiroshima, which was cool because I had actually never been to Hiroshima before. We went all the way down to Hiroshima and to the bomb site and in that museum, and it's very haunting. I do recommend that if you are an American, like totes go to that museum, because I don't know about the rest of you, maybe the curriculum's changed a little bit, but when I was in school learning about World War II and our part in you know, and our role in the war with the Japanese people and the like, they left out they left out, for one, like the atrocities that the Japanese people were committing like before and during the war, like Manchuria and all that. It was absolutely horrific and disgusting. And if you don't know about that, totally look that up. But also they'd always gloss over like, oh, we had to bomb them, otherwise so many more people would have died. And it's always like presented in our American history classes as this humanitarian thing almost, that we frickin' atom bombed them. But if you go to the museum and you see the pictures of the just mutilated and just people and the cities and how the sickness and everything raged on and on and on and on into the future, and just all the fallout that caused, literally and figuratively, you're gonna change your perspective a little bit. And aside from the museum, Hiroshima is a pretty cool place to visit as well. And we also went to Kobe, which is another place I had not gone before. And Kobe was nice. Like, the only thing I remember about Kobe was long, scary, windy bus ride up a mountain just so we could get a view. And, like, the view was kind of cool, but I've never been a fan of views, like, views of cities, like, aerial views of them. I frankly don't see the appeal. Like, I like natural wonders. I like, you know, climbing up to a mountain and looking at the forest and stuff like that. But like looking down at a city, I just don't really see the appeal there. And it was so dark and cold and I couldn't really see anything anyway. And I was so terrified of the bus, like winding up the dark mountain, because again, I was scared of cars at that point in my life. So that sucked, but I remembered that night we stayed in a really nice hotel. We had like a nice Western style dinner, and like it was so fancy we wore our school uniforms for it. And there was like a shower in our own room, so I didn't have to awkwardly pretend that I was on my period, so that I wouldn't have to go to public bathhouses. So yeah, that's a good segue. The Shugaku Ryoko, we mostly stayed at like ryokan. Not ryokan specifically. I don't think so. I don't think they were that luxurious. Maybe we did stay in actual ryokan. I don't really remember. I didn't know the distinction between, like, ryokan are like really nice tatami style old school Japanese inns, but I know there's like cheaper versions of that. Anyway, we stayed in places where you go down to the bath area to bathe publicly, and like I was very very modest. I still am. Like, I don't like the idea of being in a room of naked people. And, but back then, like, it was just unthinkable. I would have just screamed and ran out of the room if I had to be naked with people that I didn't know, or people that I did know. Like, I just didn't like the idea. And so, like, when it was bath time, I lied and said I was on my period so I didn't have to go. And it worked out. Like, the vacation was like 4 or 5 days, so it's like, oh yeah, I just started it, like, right now. And they're like, oh, Not gonna finish till after we're home. Yeah, so I didn't do any of the public bathing during the Shugaku-ryoko. Put a pin in that though, we're gonna come back to that later. But the other places we went to on the Shugaku-ryoko, which I wasn't as jazzed about because I had already been there, were Kyoto and, well, actually, did we go to Osaka? Yes, we went to Osaka as well, because we went to Osaka-jo, Osaka Castle. So yeah, we went to Osaka and Kyoto, and pretty much all the places we went to in Kyoto, I remember in particular, we even split off into little groups on day 4. Out of 5, yes, we were there for 5 days. Day 4, we split off into little 4-person groups, and I had not had a say in what group I was in, so I wound up in a group of people that I didn't like, actually. It was kind of sad. But yeah, I remember we went to like all the places in Kyoto that I had already been to when I went to Japan 2 years before. We went to the theme park where it's like Edo theme park. We went to Kinkakuji, the gold temple, shrine temple. Kinkakuji, we went there. Yeah, and just all the places I've already been to in Kyoto. And again, it was people I didn't really like. So that was kind of meh. So yeah, like half the Shugaku-ryoko was kind of like, I've already been to these places, I just want to go home. I also hate like being on vacations with big groups of people, especially sharing rooms with big groups of people. I did not sleep very well, like the entire trip. So I was like really, really grouchy. Yeah, and I remember like wishing that the circumstances were a little bit different because I feel like, what a waste. I should be enjoying myself on this trip, but I just like halfway through, I just really wanted to go back home. And by home, I mean to my host family. I didn't mean America home. I mean home to my host family where I could curl up and read manga by myself in solitude. So that was a Shugaku-ryoko. Some good, some bad. And then, it was right after that, right before Christmas, that I went to the second host family. And yeah, most of that time I was just home reading books and manga. And then pretty soon after that, we had the Rotary winter camp. So that one was just an overnighter, and it was up in the mountains because it was like a ski trip. And that already turned me off because I don't like skiing. I think you can tell I'm a very adventurous and exciting person. Thankfully, the other exchange students didn't really want to ski either, so we just kind of hung out in the snow. But that was like, but I felt really super out of place. Often whenever I hung out with any of the exchange students, I felt kind of out of place because they would all like talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, actually, yeah, they talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They talk about like sex most of the time because I mean they're teenagers between the ages of 16 and 18. What else are they going to talk about? And like they talk about drinking and drugs, and they all drank. Most of them did, and some of them smoked and like did very light drugs, you know, not hard drugs. But like I was this super like my dad raised me very conservative and Christian, so there was like that part of it that was me going like And then I didn't find out until well after the fact when Tumblr finally came up with a word for it that I'm demisexual. So there was also just like, I'm totally not interested in sex. Why won't you shut up about sex? And then like they kept trying to like sneak off and like fool around with these guys that they had just met. And like I was their interpreter because their Japanese was still not that great yet, and they wanted me to like proposition the guys like, hey, you want to go, you know, can we go back to your hotel room and fool around? Like, how long is your penis? I'm like, why don't you guys like learn how to say those things yourself? So it was a very awkward and weird trip for me, and I didn't sleep at all that night. I got like 1 hour of sleep because we were all sprawled out in a room together. And like I had to leave early the next morning too because Tsuyoshi-san was going to take me back, and we had a meeting with the Rotary Club because he and I were going to be hosting this big like important Rotary presentation meeting thing in a couple weeks. He was going to host it, he was going to MC it, and I was going to be his interpreter. I wasn't like interpreting on the spot, like it was all completely 100% scripted, but I still had to be there anyway. And I remember I hated coffee back then. I did not have a taste for it, but I was given a cup of coffee at the meeting and I guzzled it down and got seconds because I was like such a zombie from only getting like an hour of sleep the night before. So yeah, that was fun. Okay, another thing that was really awkward about the winter camp was that there was an onsen. And onsens are quintessentially Japanese, and I was still very squeamish about like being naked around a bunch of naked people, but I was like, dude, I'm in Japan, it's very like, and we're at an actual onsen, outdoor bath, it's snowing, I should do this, suck it up. And Shannon, another girl in the group, she was also quite shy, and at her shugak ryoko, like, they had stayed at nice hotels the whole time, so she never had to bathe publicly, so she and I were both like the non-public bathing people. All the other exchange students at that point had bathed publicly, like on their shugak ryoko or otherwise, and they were all okay with it. But Shannon and I were still shy, so we promised we would guard each other with towels, like while we were showering off before the bath, and while we're stepping into the bath, we guarded each other with towels, so that was okay. But even so, like, I still felt kind of uncomfortable there. It's one of those things, like, I wish I was okay with it, I wish I was comfortable with it, because I think it would be really cool to enjoy that, but... I think my favorite trip maybe that I went on the entire year that I was there was visiting my friends in Saitama. So I have mentioned this in passing in several different videos, but we had an exchange student from Japan when I was 7 or 8. I keep forgetting how old I was. But yeah, my dad, we had lots of exchange students when I was growing up, but the very first one that we ever had was Kaoru from Japan. And she only stayed with us for like 3 weeks, and my parents were divorced, so I was only over there like 1 day per week, so I only saw her maybe like a total of 4 or 5 days, but she left a very lasting impression on me. And out of all of the families that hosted her while she was an exchange student in America, we were the only family that actually wrote back to her, and we kept in correspondence with her. So as a result, she came over to America like every 2 or 3 years or so for a while, and then when I was 16, I went over to visit them by myself for a week, and so I was 18 now, and I was going to visit them again. And it was really interesting, because this time I could actually speak Japanese to them, and they had just had a baby, who is now like 18 or 19 years old. Wow, I'm old. So I went there, and they were living in Saitama at the time. They live in Ehime now. It was cool. While I was there with them, that was when I finally got to go to Tokyo and to animate and get anime merch. It was finally like, yay, anime. But it was really cool seeing them again too, of course, like familiar faces. And again, it was really neat and surreal, like talking to them in their actual native language now instead of in broken English. And then after I stayed with them for a few days in Saitama, we all went up to Iwate together. And that was kind of cool, showing them around there. I took them to Ki-chan's, because, like, that's what I did with anyone who ever came to visit me, is I'd take them to Ki-chan's, because, like, Ki-chan is the best. And speaking of taking people to Ki-chan's and people visiting me, in April, which was the month after I went to Saitama, a group of people, adults from various places of the United States, came to visit Japan for a month. And they were there just like to learn things, I guess. It was like an adult exchange, but only for a month. They weren't necessarily there really to learn the language. They were there more just to learn about the culture and go on a very long holiday, kind of. And I went around with them for the first week that they were there. And they did some pretty cool things. Like, Mizusawa is known for ironwork, and among other things, so we went to like an iron place, and we went to a cow museum, because again, I mentioned earlier that Iwate is known for their beef. And the cow museum was great. Well, I mean, the museum itself was, you know, it's a museum. It was like, okay. But I remember having a really delicious lunch there with really, really good beef. And I was nervous initially because I thought I was going to have to interpret for the group while we were going on all these tours, but they had their leader who was with them was like really good bilingual. Like, he was a businessman who was used to interpreting stuff like that. So he did all the work, and I was just kind of along for the ride, and that was kind of cool. And one of the adults was staying with my first host family. At the time, I was staying with my third host family. She was staying with my first host family, and thinking of her. And I took her to Ki-chan's, and I was really happy that she liked it. And then in May, it seems like every month something big happened, but in May, my dad and stepmom came to visit me, and I took them to Ki-chan's. And I was looking over my old notes, my old journals that I wrote, and I had apparently asked my parents to bring Ki-chan like a mug and saucer as an omiyage. And they did, and so that was pretty cool. And what else? Things and stuff. There's so many things I didn't talk about. It's so freaking long and I'm running out of daylight. So I left Japan in June, and looking back, I wish I'd stayed for like an entire year. I could have stayed all the way through August, but I didn't. I guess, oh, I remember why I wanted to go back when I did. It was so I could go to Anime Expo in early July. God, I was such a weeb. Anyway, but yeah, Watase Yu is gonna be at that Anime Expo, so in my defense, that's why I wanted to go back by then. And also I went back like right around when my birthday was in June, so there was also that. I think I wanted to be home kind of for my birthday. So yeah, I went home like 2 days before my birthday. And it was by the very, very end of the stay that I was like barely starting to make friends with some of the Japanese people in my school, most notably in Minzoku Buyobu, the folk dancing club, because by then I had figured out that it meets every day instead of 1 day a week, and I'd done some performances with them, and we'd gone out to yakiniku together and stuff, and like was finally starting to sort of become friends with people there. And one of the girls, Eddie, she was sort of becoming a mini me. She was like, I had my hair long and straight and parted in the middle, and she started growing out her hair long and straight and parted in the middle, and she wrote letters back and forth to me after I went back to America just for a little bit. And she was really nice. She made a little cassette tape, a little compilation of like little goodbye messages from people in the club and from teachers and stuff like that. So that was really cute. And when my last day at school, they actually had an assembly for me, which was, I felt like it was overkill. I didn't want them to bother, but they had like an assembly. And I danced with the folk dancing club, and I gave a speech again. I don't think anyone helped me write this one. I just gave a speech. And I wore a yukata that I had made in my Japanese sewing class. And then I got flowers, and I got paper fans. Woo! This and a blue one like it are the paper fans that I got from the folk dancing club, as well as some zori, the special dancing zori that they had that were like rubbery, so they're really comfortable to dance in for zori. And I got all that stuff, and then I had to empty out my desk and carry it home, and it was all ceremonious and like wonderful Sarah Day. And then when it was time for me to go home from school, I had to walk home in like 82 degrees, humid, carrying all that crap. So that's what I remember more than the rest of the day. Anyway, there's so many things that happened in the year that I didn't even mention, but if I did, this video would be like 3 hours long. So I'll just end it there. Thanks for watching. If you are interested in being an exchange student in Japan, I have a whole playlist about my year there and what to do and what not to do. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to ask. Bye!